Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 617 for the 14th of Av in a regular year. Today, we're going to talk about the vagus nerve. What is the vagus nerve, you might ask? Well, so there are actually 12 cranial nerves in the body that come in pairs, and they help link the brain with other parts of the body. Some of these cranial nerves serve a sensory purpose, whereby they send details of sensation that we're experiencing in the world into the brain. These are what are known as afferent neurons, that they go, it's like a bottom-up kind of thing from the senses that we're experiencing in our body up into the brain. And then we have some cranial nerves that serve a more motor focus. They focus more on movement, on causing us to move. These are what are called efferent neurons. They carry motor information from the brain into the muscles and the glands of the body in order to initiate different kinds of actions that we do. And some of these cranial nerves actually serve both functions. The vagus nerve, which is our star today, serves both. And the vagus nerve is actually the longest of all the nerves. It's in Latin, the word vagus actually means wandering nerve because it is this very long nerve. And it's responsible for so many different things in our body, whether we're talking about digestion, respiration, heart rate, cardiovascular activity. There's so many things that the vagus nerve is responsible for. And there's actually also different parts of the vagus nerve that this is a whole study. And it's a topic actually that I have been doing quite a bit of research about in the past little while. And it's fascinating to see what is involved in the vagus nerve and what a crucial role it plays in both our physical and our mental and emotional health. One of the more popular aspects of the vagus nerve and what it's become more well known for in the past little while is its link to the parasympathetic system, that aspect of the nervous system that we have that actually helps us become calm and relaxed. And it's sort of like the counterpart to the sympathetic nervous system that's known as our more fight or flight type of nervous system, that when we go into a state of fear or activation, we're in a dangerous situation, the sympathetic nervous system gets aroused. And sometimes people have trouble, especially in our society where there's a lot of loud noises and activity and busyness and all that stuff, to go from a sympathetic state to a parasympathetic state, which is this more relaxed, calm kind of place where our heartbeat gets lower, our respiration gets slower, and all of that. And it's been shown that by stimulating the vagus nerve, this can actually help us get into this more parasympathetic state, get into this more relaxed state, which is why the vagus nerve has become so popular in the past little while, because we're all looking for that calmness, that relaxation, right? That de-stressing. So the question becomes, how then do we access the vagus nerve? How do we stimulate the vagus nerve? And there are actually a lot of different ways that you can do this. There are different exercises that can be done, different breathing techniques. Even the food that we eat can play a role in this. There's actually a huge link between the vagus nerve and gut health. And gut health is very much connected to our mental state of mind, the mind gut connection. This is something that's being further and further explored all the time nowadays. But one way that's really interesting that we can actually access the vagus nerve is through music, listening to music, and even more so singing, actually, because the vagus nerve is very close to the ear. So that's where listening to music would come in. But it's also actually very much connected to the larynx, which is the voice box. So when we sing, and it's actually a lot more connected there. So when we sing, and especially often people say when you hum, like when you make the sound of that's actually a really good way to activate the vagus nerve. So when in learning about all this stuff and really thinking about it, something that came to mind for me, which is what's going to kind of lead us into today's Tanya, is Niggunim, Hasidic Niggunim, and thinking about Farbrengens, where people, those of you that aren't familiar, Farbrengens were these gatherings where, people can have these gatherings nowadays as well, but most famously, these were these gatherings where Hasidim would go and participate together with the Rebbe, and throughout the generations, Hasidim would gather together with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would give different talks then, and everybody would gather, but one of the biggest components of these Farbrengens is they would actually sing Niggunim, Hasidic melodies, and a lot of these Hasidic melodies don't actually have words, or they have some words, but there's a lot of like ay-ay-ay's kind of sounds to them. So it's a lot of like, maybe not humming per se, but it's a lot of vocal movement going on. And it's this collective movement so that we're stimulating both the ear through listening to the music, but at the same time, since there is this group participation, everybody is encouraged to participate in the singing. So this is interesting because when people think about a Farbrengen and think about singing in Niggunim, and Niggunim have known to have a kind of healing quality to them, then this could actually give us a sense of why this might be on a very strong physiological level. Clearly stated, when we sing Niggunim, when we listen to Niggunim, we're activating our vagus nerve, which is going to have a calming effect on the nervous system. So that's pretty amazing, right? At the same time, I don't want to minimize Niggunim as being just like, this physiological thing, just like a song like everything else. Because if that was the case, then we can just say, okay, so go to a Farbrengen and hum anything. We could hum Mozart. We could sing a pop tune. We could sing whatever it is. But obviously we don't want to do that. And we actually want to sing the specific Niggunim. And that's because aside from just the physiological aspect of these Niggunim that, are activating the vagus nerve in this way through the actual sounds that come out from the notes, from the words that we say, that it's creating these very specific sounds that are stimulating us in this physical way. There's also something about the Niggunim that is inherently spiritual, like the content of the Niggunim, the deeper meanings behind the Niggunim. They're not just random words strung together. Even the actual melodies, it's thought to be like a very, very, there's a lot of depth in the melodies. If you ever follow any of these Hasidic Niggunim and explore some of it, you'll see that there's a lot of movement going on. And one of the things that I always thought that was very fascinating, I don't remember where I learned this, but one of the things that makes Chabad Niggunim really unique as opposed to other types of Niggunim, because there are a lot of other Jewish Niggunim out there, not only Chabad Niggunim, but Chabad Niggunim always come down. There's always like a movement downwards. They might go up, but then they always return back down, which makes a lot of sense because Chabad is all about being grounded, being connected to physical reality. So it's never going to just leave you up there high. Some of the Niggunim might get very high, but then they're always going to come back down. If you're not sure what I mean, go listen to some Chabad Niggunim after this, and maybe you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about. So why am I bringing all this up today? Because today we're actually going to talk about the idea of the Hebrew letters, and we're going to talk about how the Hebrew letters actually have these two aspects to them. The more physical aspect to them, which is this more like the sound that's made by the Hebrew letters. And this is what's known as the matter of the Hebrew letters. And then there's the form of the Hebrew letters, which is the more deeper essential component to these letters. It's like the pre-verbal aspect of the letters. And we're going to talk about how this really applies to Hashem creating the world, both our world and the world to come, which we know are created through letters, because we know that it's taught that the future world to come is created with the letter Yud, and our world is created through the letter Hey. And we're going to try to understand why that is and what the difference is between the two. And as we'll see, it really has to do with these two components of the form and matter of the letters. So again, if we wanted to go back to the Niggunim, we could say that the form of the Niggunim is kind of like the deeper hidden meaning of the Niggunim, the why it goes up, why it goes down, what the message is that's being tried to convey with it. And then the matter of the Niggunim is the actual sound that comes out, the actual sound that comes out from the vocal cords when we actually express these Niggunim. And as we'll see, to get technical about it, we'll see that the letter Yud is the letter that we associate with the form of the letters, this more deeper inner aspect of the letters. And the letter Hey is what we associate with the matter of the letters, the more external aspects of the letters. And we'll see that, the letter Yud, one of the things that it's connected to is Chokhmah, is what we translate to mean the wisdom of Hashem. It's kind of like this, it's the first of all the spheros, and we know that Hashem creates everything through Chokhmah. And we're going to understand what this means, because when we say that the Olam Haba, the world to come, was created through the letter Yud, and we say that our world was created through the letter Hey, how does this work exactly when we understand that Hashem creates everything through Chokhmah, which is the letter Yud? So how is our world also coming from that place of Yud, even though it manifests as the letter Hey? So let's get into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe explains all of this. He isn't going to talk about Niggunim. It's just, this was sort of like a springboard that I thought would be interesting to get into the discussion. But he is going to talk about this, the inner and outer aspects of the letters, and how all that works in terms of form and matter and the creation of the worlds and all of that. I think it'd be good first to give a little bit of context before jumping right into it in terms of what we've been talking about in general lately in the Tanya, to kind of put this all in perspective. So we've been trying to come to a deeper understanding of what it means that we can create God's name through our acts of tzedakah. And we talked about how when we think about God's name, we look at the name of God, the Tetragrammaton, which is made up of 4 levels, the Yud, the Hey, and the Vav, and the Hey. And yesterday, we began this discussion. We kicked off the discussion when we really started talking about speech in this kind of general sense. And we noted a very interesting phenomenon whereby speech, which is associated with the level of Malchus, which is the lowest of all the 10 attributes, actually has a connection with the highest, which is Chokhmah. Because we know that when we speak, when we say different words, we're not consciously thinking about the external form that our mouths are taking when we say those words. We're thinking more about the meaning of the words. We're thinking more about I want to say this particular word, and then the body follows, which kind of points to the fact that really the origin of speech is in this more intuitive space, the chokhmah as we call it, or the yud. So today, we're going to take this discussion a little bit deeper when it comes to speech. And we're going to talk about how when it comes to speech, well, especially if we're talking about Hebrew speech or the Lashon HaKodesh, from which is the speech that God creates the world at all times, it happens by way of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And what we're going to talk about today is about how these letters actually have 2 aspects to them. There's the form of the Hebrew letters, and then there's the matter of the Hebrew letters. In Hebrew, we call it chomer, v'tzura. Chomer is the matter, and then there's the tzura, the form. And we'll talk about the difference between these 2 things, these 2 aspects. And in the process of this discussion, we're really going to come to understand this expansive nature of speech and what that's all about, and why speech and why our world in particular is associated particularly with the letter Hey, which is this more expansive kind of letter. So the Alter Rebbe begins today. And for context, we're beginning a new paragraph in Epistle 5 of Iggeres HaKodesh. And the Alter Rebbe talks about how the letters there are 2 aspects to the letters. There's, just like I said, so there's the aspect of the matter of the letters, and then there's the aspect of the form of the letters. And another way to understand these 2 aspects of the letters is there's the inner aspect of the letter, and then there's the external aspect of the letter. So the inner aspect of the letter can be thought of as the form of the letter, or maybe the soul of the letter, if you want to kind of think about that. And the outer aspect of the letter is what's known as the matter of the letter. It can be thought of as the body of the letter. For each one of the letters, it has these 2 aspects. And so now, even though, as we were talking about yesterday, we kept talking about this idea of chokhmah. We kept talking about this idea that the origin of speech is in chokhmah. So even though the origin, yes, in a certain sense, the origin of these letters comes from the primordial space of the soul, and in fact, higher than chokhmah, in the will of the soul, This is when we're referring to the form of the letters and the different ways that we pronounce these 22 letters, like the actual like manifest like speech. That's, like we talked about yesterday, all the things we talked about yesterday. But then there's another aspect of the letters, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And this is the aspect of the body of the letters, the matter of the letters. And this is that more mechanical kind of process that we kind of glossed over a little bit yesterday, but we're going to talk about it more today. That's the actual movement of my lips, of my throat, of all of these things, the actual mechanical processes that allow the speech to happen. And the origin of all of those things, the origin of the mechanics of speech, really comes from the breath that comes from the heart. And out of that comes this like very primordial, this like very simple sound that issues from the throat. And this sound that issues from the throat is divided into 22 different types of enunciations and different types of pronunciations of the 22 letters through the 5 organs of speech. So, for example, the Alter Rebbe gives an example of like the 5 organs of speech. So there's the throat. The throat is one organ of speech. What are and for each one of the 5 organs of speech, there's different letters associated with each one. So for the throat, there are 5 letters that are articulated through the throat. There's the aleph, right? Because when we say that's the sound that the aleph makes. Think about that. That's in your throat. You can say that with me. Then there's the chet. That's in the throat, right? A lot of non-Jewish people don't know how to say that. The sounds, that comes from your throat. So if anybody doesn't know how to say that, you can practice it through your throat, through kind of constricting your throat in that way. Then there's the hey sound. So that would be ha. It's also the throat. And there's the ayin, which is or like, it sounds kind of like the aleph. Sephardim can kind of make it sounds a little bit more. I'm not so good at that, but it has a slightly different sound than the aleph, but they all come from the throat. Then another example is that there's the palate. The palate, what are the letters of the palate? The palate is the gimel, the yud, the kaf, and the kuf. So think about those. Say those letters slowly and like the sounds with it. Gimel, g. So you're using your palate for that. Yud, you're using your palate. Ya, ka. For kaf, and kuf also ka. So that's all your palate, you're using it. So we're really looking at the mechanical aspects of the pronunciation with these letters. And so this happens by way of like the sounds being broken down through these different organs of verbal articulations. However, the simple sound itself of that breath of the letter hey, this letter is called the light letter, the ata kalila chule, it's called. So this letter is the source of the matter and the body of the letters before they are divided up into the 22 letters. So it's really this letter hey that's the origin of the matter of the letter. So like yesterday we talked about the yud, we talked about the chokhmah more. That we can say in a simple terms is the yud is like the origin of the form of the letters, and the hey is the origin of the matter of the letters. And now we can understand a little bit what it is, this teaching that we find in the sages, that this world was created through the letter hey. So that's the end of the section for today, and we'll continue along these lines tomorrow when we continue to talk about this letter hey, and we actually bring up a question regarding this whole discussion. So stay tuned for that, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.